The small garage sat at the edge of town, squeezed between an old tire shop and a closed-down diner with broken windows. The paint on the garage walls had faded years ago, and the sign above the door hung crooked, held by one stubborn bolt that refused to give up, much like the man who worked beneath it. Every morning before the sun rose, he unlocked the garage and stepped inside, breathing in the smell of oil, rust, and old metal. To him, that smell meant survival. It meant another chance to keep going. He was poor, but not careless. His clothes were clean, even if they were worn thin. His hands were rough and scarred, carrying years of hard work. He fixed cars because he had to, but also because it was the one thing he knew how to do well. When engines failed and others gave up, he stayed. Business had been slow for months. People in town preferred newer shops with shiny tools and bright lights. They didn't trust a place that looked tired. Bills stacked up on the small desk near the back wall, unopened but always present. Rent, electricity, parts suppliers, each envelope felt heavier than the last. Still, he showed up every day. That evening, the sky turned dark faster than expected. Thick clouds rolled in, and rain began to fall hard, hitting the pavement like stones. He was about to close early when he heard the sound of a tow truck pulling up. The truck stopped right in front of the garage. Its lights cut through the rain, and behind it, tied with chains, was a car that barely looked worth saving. It was a Corvette. Or at least, it used to be one. The paint was scratched and dull, rust creeping along the edges. One headlight was cracked, the tires were bald, and the hood looked like it had been forced open too many times. Most mechanics would have taken one look and shaken their heads. The tow truck driver jumped out, soaked and annoyed. "You the mechanic?" He shouted over the rain. He nodded and wiped his hands on a rag. "Guy wants it dropped here," the driver said. Paid cash. The driver unhooked the chains and left quickly, clearly happy to be rid of the job. The rain softened to a drizzle, and that's when the owner stepped forward. He didn't look like much. Middle-aged, plain jacket. No jewelry. No expensive watch. He stood quietly, hands in his pockets, watching the broken car as if it held memories only he could see. "I know it's a mess," the man said calmly. "I just need it checked. Fixed if possible." The mechanic walked around the car slowly. He bent down, looked underneath, tapped the rusted frame, opened the hood. The engine was old, but not dead. Neglected, yes. Abused, maybe, but not finished. "This won't be cheap," he said honestly. "Might not even be worth it." The man nodded. "I understand. Just do what you can. Don't rush, and don't charge more than it's worth." That last sentence surprised him. Most customers begged for discounts. This one asked not to be overcharged. He looked at the man again. There was something different about him. Not sad, not desperate. Just quiet. Like someone who had seen too much and learned to say little. "All right," the mechanic said. "I'll take a look tomorrow." The man thanked him, reached into his pocket, and placed a small envelope on the desk. "For your time," he said. When he left, the garage felt oddly still. Later that night, curiosity got the better of him. He opened the envelope. Inside was more cash than most people paid just for an inspection. His heart skipped for a moment. "This car isn't junk," he whispered to himself. The next morning, he arrived early. The Corvette sat in the center of the garage, silent and waiting. He rolled up his sleeves and got to work. As the hours passed, he discovered things that didn't make sense. High-end parts hidden under dirt. Custom work done years ago by skilled hands. This car had once been loved deeply. Someone had spent serious money on it. Why let it rot? He worked carefully, not rushing, not cutting corners. Even when a bolt snapped or grease spilled, he stayed calm. He talked to the car the way some people talk to old friends. "All right," he muttered. "Let's see what you're hiding." By afternoon, the owner returned. He stood at the doorway, watching quietly as the mechanic worked. "You don't have to stay," the mechanic said without looking up. "This'll take time." "I know," the man replied. "I just like watching someone who cares about what they do." They talked while the mechanic worked. Simple things, weather, cars, life. The man asked about the garage, how long it had been there. "Since my father's time," the mechanic said. "He taught me everything. After he passed, I kept it going." "That can't be easy," the man said. "It's not," he replied. "But giving up is harder." The man smiled faintly at that dot before leaving. The man asked, "Why didn't you turn this job away?" The mechanic wiped his hands and thought for a moment. "Because it deserves a chance. Just like people do." That night, as the garage lights dimmed, the mechanic sat alone, thinking about the strange customer and the strange car. He had no idea that the quiet man who walked in, wearing simple clothes, owned companies across the world. No idea that the Corvette wasn't just a car, but a test. For the first time in a long while, the mechanic felt something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. And the man driving away in a modest car felt something too, for the first time in years. He believed he might finally find someone who saw him for who he really was, not for what he owned. The next few days passed slowly, but the garage felt different now. The Corvette sat in the middle of the floor like a quiet guest who had finally been noticed. Every morning, the mechanic walked around it before touching anything, as if greeting it first. He believed cars carried stories, and this one felt heavy with them. He began with the basics, cleaning years of dirt from the engine, draining old oil that smelled burnt and forgotten. As he worked, he noticed how carefully some parts had been installed long ago. Whoever first owned this car had not treated it like a toy. It had been handled with care, even love, that made the neglect harder to understand. Money was always on his mind. Each new part he needed meant another worry. He checked prices twice, sometimes 3 times, before ordering anything. He refused to use cheap replacements that would fail later. Even if it meant earning less, he wanted the job done right. Late one afternoon, the quiet owner returned again. This time, he brought 2 cups of tea from a nearby stall. He placed one on the workbench without saying much. "You didn't have to," the mechanic said. "I know," the man replied. "But I wanted to." They drank in silence for a moment. The sound of rain tapping on the metal roof filled the space between them. "I've taken this car to other garages before," the man said finally. "Most didn't even bother opening the hood." The mechanic shrugged. "Sometimes people see rust and stop looking." The man nodded slowly, like the words meant more than just cars to him. As the days passed, the visits became more frequent. The man never rushed him, never complained. He asked questions, but never acted like he knew more. That alone felt rare. One evening, while tightening a bolt under the hood, the mechanic noticed something strange. A small marking on one of the parts. It wasn't from a normal supplier. It was custom work, the kind only expensive shops handled. He paused, wiped his hands, and looked again. There were more signs. Small details most people wouldn't notice. This Corvette hadn't just been expensive. It had been special. When the man arrived the next day, the mechanic couldn't keep quiet. "This car," he said carefully, "it wasn't cheap when it was built." The man smiled slightly. "No, it wasn't. You put a lot into it," the mechanic continued. "Then you just let it sit?" The man leaned against the doorframe. "I lost interest." "That doesn't happen with cars like this," the mechanic said. Something else happened. The man didn't answer right away. He watched the mechanic work, his eyes thoughtful, People happened, he said at last. The mechanic didn't push. He understood that tone. It was the sound of someone who had learned not to explain too much. Later that night, after locking up, the mechanic sat at his small desk and opened the bills again. The numbers didn't look any better. He rubbed his forehead, feeling the weight of it all. Fixing this Corvette was taking time. Time he could have spent on quick jobs that paid faster. But something about this felt important. Even if he couldn't explain why the next morning, something unexpected happened. A supplier called. "We got an order placed under your shop name," the voice said. "High-quality parts. Already paid." The mechanic froze. Paid by who? The supplier hesitated. The customer who owns the Corvette. The mechanic felt his chest tighten. These parts were expensive. Too expensive. When the man came by later, the mechanic confronted him. "I didn't ask for this," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "I said I'd fix it honestly." "I know," the man replied. "And you still are. I just didn't want you choosing between your work and your survival." That struck deeper than the man probably intended. The mechanic exhaled slowly. "You can't just throw money at things." The man smiled softly. "I'm not throwing it. I'm trusting you with it." They stood there, the space between them filled with something unspoken. Work continued. The engine slowly came back to life. Not fully, but enough to feel promising. The mechanic smiled for the first time in days when he heard it turn over. "You hear that?" he said. The man nodded. "Sounds like it remembers how to breathe." As they talked more, the mechanic shared pieces of his life without meaning to. How his father taught him to listen to engines. How the garage almost closed twice already. How he stayed because it was all he had left. The man listened closely. He never interrupted. Never tried to compare. One afternoon, while the mechanic was underneath the car, he heard a question that caught him off guard. "Do you ever feel invisible?" The man asked. The mechanic slid out, wiping grease from his face. "Most days." The man looked down. "So do I." That was the moment the mechanic realized this job wasn't just about fixing a car. Something was being repaired on both sides. A week later, a stranger came into the garage. Well-dressed, confident. He glanced at the Corvette and raised an eyebrow. "Interesting piece," he said. "Belongs to someone important?" The mechanic felt a strange tension in his chest. "Belongs to someone who trusts me." The stranger smirked. "Trust doesn't pay bills." Before the mechanic could respond, the quiet owner stepped in. "It pays more than you think," he said calmly. The stranger laughed and left. Clearly unimpressed, the mechanic watched the man closely after that. The way he spoke. The way others reacted without knowing why. There was power there. Hidden, but real. One night, as the mechanic closed the garage, he looked back at the Corvette. It looked better already. Cleaner, stronger, like it was waking up. He had no idea how deep this road would go. He only knew one thing. This job was changing everything. And neither of them was ready for what would come next. By the second week, the garage felt less like a workplace and more like a quiet meeting place. The mechanic knew every sound inside it, the drip of oil, the creak of the old fan, the hum of the lights. But now there was another sound he was waiting for each day. The low, familiar engine turn of the modest car that belonged to the Corvette's owner. The man never announced himself. He just appeared, standing near the door, watching without interrupting. Sometimes he stayed 10 minutes, sometimes an hour. He always left with a small nod and a calm smile. The Corvette was changing fast. The rust was treated, the engine cleaned, the wiring repaired. Under all the damage, the car had strength. It reminded the mechanic of people who had been worn down but not broken. Still, questions were growing in his mind. One afternoon, While replacing a fuel line, he found something that made him stop completely. Hidden behind a panel was a tracking system, old, expensive, and professional. Not the kind used by normal drivers. The kind used by collectors or people with reasons to protect valuable assets. He sat back on the floor, staring at it. Why would anyone hide this in a car they called junk? He muttered. That night, he couldn't sleep. His thoughts kept returning to the quiet man. The way he spoke. The way he listened. The way he never once asked for a discount, yet seemed to understand money better than anyone he had met. The next day, when the man arrived, the mechanic didn't greet him the usual way. There's something I need to ask, he said. The man sensed the shift immediately. Go on. This car, the mechanic said carefully. It's not just old or special. It's protected. Someone went to great lengths to secure it. The man looked at the Corvette for a long moment. His calm expression didn't break, but his eyes softened. You're very observant, he said. I don't like surprises, the mechanic replied, especially when they're parked in my garage. The man exhaled slowly. That's fair. They sat on two old chairs near the workbench. The rain started again outside, steady and quiet. I didn't come here to cause trouble, the man said. I came here to disappear. The mechanic frowned. People don't disappear by restoring rare cars. A small smile crossed the man's face. No, but they can hide in plain sight. Silence settled between them. Finally, the man spoke again. I didn't lie to you about what I wanted. I wanted it fixed. But I didn't tell you everything. That part was clear, the mechanic said, trying to keep his voice steady. The man nodded. I've spent most of my life being seen for what I own, not for who I am. Every conversation had an angle. Every smile had a price. The mechanic listened. He had heard pain before. This sounded like it, so I stepped away, the man continued. I dressed down. I stopped using my name. I stopped living the life people expected of me. The mechanic crossed his arms. You're saying you're rich? The man didn't hesitate. Very. The word hung heavy in the air. The mechanic stood up and walked a few steps away. He didn't shout. He didn't curse. That scared him more than anger would have. You should have told me, he said quietly. I wanted to, the man replied. But I needed to know first. Know what? Whether you would treat me the same. The mechanic turned around. You let me work my hands raw while you tested me? I let you be yourself, the man said. Just like you let me be. That didn't sit well. I don't run tests on people, the mechanic said. I fix cars. I know, the man replied softly. That's why I chose you. The mechanic shook his head. You don't get to choose honesty after hiding the truth. For the first time since they met, the man looked unsure. I wasn't trying to trick you, he said. I was trying to protect what little faith I had left. The mechanic sighed. He felt tired. Not physically, but deep down. Leave the car, he said after a moment. I'll finish the job. But after that, we're done. The man nodded slowly. I'll respect that. For the next few days, the garage returned to its old rhythm. Quiet, focused. The mechanic worked without small talk, without shared tea. He did the job right, but his heart wasn't in it the same way. Then something unexpected happened. Letter arrived. It wasn't from a bank or a supplier. It had no return address. Inside was a single page and a check folded neatly beneath it. The letter was short. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm thanking you for reminding me what real work looks like. Use this only if you choose to. No pressure. No conditions. The check was for an amount that made the mechanic's hands tremble. He sat down heavily. This wasn't payment. It was an offer. When the man came back the next day, the mechanic placed the letter and check on the workbench. "I don't want this," he said. The man looked relieved. "I hoped you'd say that. But," the mechanic continued, "I also won't pretend it didn't matter." The man nodded. "Fair. I don't need your money," the mechanic said. "I need respect." "You have it," the man replied without hesitation. The mechanic studied him. Really looked this time. Not as a customer. Not as a mystery. Just as a man who looked tired of standing alone. "I'll finish the Corvette," the mechanic said. "Not because you're rich. Because I gave my word." The man smiled. Not wide. Not proud. Just grateful dot as days passed. The final touches came together. The engine ran smoother. The body shined under fresh polish. The Corvette no longer looked forgotten. It looked alive. Late one evening, as the mechanic wiped his hands and stepped back, he felt something shift inside him. Not trust. Not yet. But understanding. Some people hid because they were ashamed of having nothing. Others hid because they had. Too much dot both knew loneliness dot as the garage lights went off and the Corvette rested quietly. Both men knew the truth had changed things forever, but what neither of them knew was that the real test hadn't even begun yet. The Corvette was almost done now. Anyone who walked past the garage could see the difference. The dull shell had turned sharp again. The paint wasn't perfect, but it shined with pride. The engine no longer coughed or hesitated. It spoke with confidence, like it remembered what it was built to do. The mechanic stood back one morning and realized something strange. He didn't feel proud in the way he usually did after finishing a job. This felt heavier, like he was standing at the edge of something he didn't fully understand. The quiet owner arrived later than usual that day. He walked in slowly, eyes going straight to the car. For a moment, he said nothing. He just circled it, running his hand lightly over the hood. "You brought it back," he said softly. "It brought itself back," the mechanic replied. "I just helped." The man smiled. "That's how you always see things, isn't it?" The mechanic shrugged. "Things don't need heroes. They need patience." They stood there together, the space between them no longer tense, but not easy either. There were still things unsaid. After a moment, the man cleared his throat. "I need to talk to you about something." The mechanic leaned against the workbench. "Go on." "I want to offer you a job," the man said plainly. The mechanic didn't respond right away. "I own several private collections," the man continued. "Cars, properties, projects. I need someone I trust. Someone who won't cut corners. Someone who doesn't get blinded by numbers." The mechanic let out a slow breath. "I told you already. I don't want charity." "This isn't charity," the man said calmly. "This is work. Honest work. With pay that matches it." The mechanic looked at the floor. His mind went straight to the bills. The cracked walls of the garage. The future that always felt just out of reach. Then he shook his head. "I can't." The man looked surprised. "Why not?" "Because I didn't build this place to walk away when it finally gets noticed," the mechanic said. "And because I don't want to owe you." The man studied him closely. "You wouldn't owe me. You'd be my equal." "That's not how power works," the mechanic replied. "Even when people say it is." For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, the man nodded. "I respect that." The days that followed were strange. The Corvette stayed parked in the garage, ready but unmoved. The man kept visiting, but not as often. When he did, the conversations were shorter, lighter on the surface. He seemed thoughtful, like someone reconsidering something important. One afternoon, a woman from the local council came by. She looked around the garage, clipboard in hand, eyes sharp. "There are some zoning concerns," she said. "This area might be marked for redevelopment." The mechanic felt his stomach drop. What does that mean? It means places like this sometimes don't survive, she replied flatly. After she left, the mechanic sat alone for a long time. That evening, the man returned. You look like someone told you bad news, he said. The mechanic didn't hide it. He told him everything. The zoning, the risk, the possibility of losing the garage his family had built. The man listened quietly, jaw tight. They can't just take it, he said. They can, the mechanic replied. That's how it works for people like me. The man said nothing, but something shifted in his eyes. Not anger. Resolve. The next morning, things moved fast. A black car stopped outside the garage. Then another. Well-dressed people stepped out, speaking softly into phones. Papers were signed on the hood of a car. Conversations happened that the mechanic couldn't hear. By noon, the councilwoman returned. Her tone had changed. There seems to have been a misunderstanding, she said. This property will no longer be considered for redevelopment. The mechanic stared at her. What? She smiled stiffly. Everything is resolved. After she left, the mechanic turned to the man, his chest tight. You did this. The man didn't deny it. I made a call. I didn't ask you to, the mechanic said sharply. I know, the man replied. But I couldn't watch you lose something you earned. The mechanic ran a hand through his hair. This is exactly what I didn't want. Power stepping in when things get hard. The man met his eyes. Is it wrong to help when you can? It is when it takes away someone's choice, the mechanic said. Silence fell again. Later that night, the mechanic couldn't sleep. He sat in the dark garage, staring at the Corvette. Everything felt tangled now. Gratitude, anger, relief, pride. By morning, he had made a decision. When the man arrived, the mechanic was already waiting. I'm finishing this job today, he said. And when it's done, I'm charging you what we agreed. Nothing more. The man nodded. All right. And after that, the mechanic continued, I need space. I need to know that what I build is still mine. The man looked disappointed, but he nodded again. I understand. The final test came quietly. When the work was done, the mechanic handed over the keys. The man reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. The mechanic raised a hand. No, the man paused. Then he put the envelope back. Instead, he held out his hand. Thank you. For the work. And for the honesty. The mechanic shook it. Take care of the car. I will, the man said. It reminds me of something I almost forgot. As the Corvette rolled out of the garage, its engine smooth and steady, the mechanic watched without waving. He felt lighter. Poorer on paper, maybe, but steadier inside. What he didn't know was that the man wasn't done testing the world. He was done testing the mechanic. And the final chapter was about to begin. The garage felt empty after the Corvette left. The sound of its engine faded down the road, and the silence that followed felt heavier than before. The mechanic stood at the doorway for a long time, hands in his pockets, watching dust settle back into place. For weeks, that car had been the center of his days. Now it was gone. Life slowly returned to normal. Old sedans came in with tired brakes. Trucks with worn belts. People complained about prices and asked for favors. He handled it all the same way he always had. Honest work. Fair charges. No shortcuts, but something inside him had changed. He noticed it when a customer snapped at him over a small delay. Normally, that would have eaten at him all day. This time, it didn't. He fixed the car, wiped his hands, and let the moment pass. A few days later, a small article appeared in the local paper. It showed a photo of a restored Corvette at a private event in the city. The article talked about a rare model brought back to life by a local independent mechanic who Refused to be named. He stared at the picture. Longer than he meant to. Customers started showing up asking questions. Did you really restore that car? Heard someone important owns it. Is it true you turned down a big offer? He didn't confirm or deny much. He just kept working. One afternoon, a woman in her 40s came in driving a simple car. She waited patiently while he finished another job. I was told you're the only one in town who fixes things the right way, she said. He smiled faintly. I try. She handed him the keys and added, someone recommended you. Said you don't sell yourself cheap. That line stayed with him. Weeks passed. Business picked up. Not suddenly, not magically. Just steadily. The kind of growth that comes from trust spreading quietly. Then, one evening, a familiar modest car parked outside the garage. The mechanic didn't look up right away. He knew who it was. The man stepped inside, holding nothing but his calm presence. I hope I'm not unwelcome, he said. The mechanic wiped his hands and nodded. You're fine. They stood there for a moment, unsure who should speak first. I didn't come to offer you anything, the man said. I came to thank you properly. You already did, the mechanic replied. The man shook his head. No, I thanked you for fixing a car. I never thanked you for changing my direction. The mechanic leaned against the bench. I didn't do that. You did, the man said, by not taking what would have been easy. He paused, then added, I stopped pretending after that. I stopped hiding. The mechanic raised an eyebrow. And it was lonely, the man admitted. But it was honest. They talked for a long time that evening. About work. About mistakes. About how money solves problems but creates distance. The man spoke more openly now. Not as someone trying to be normal, but as someone learning how to be human again. Before leaving, he said, there's an event tomorrow. A small one. People from different industries. I'd like you to come. Not as my guest. As yourself. The mechanic hesitated. Crowds weren't his world. I don't belong in rooms like that, he said. You belong anywhere you choose to stand honestly, the man replied. The next night, the mechanic stood at the edge of a quiet gathering. He wore clean clothes, nothing fancy. People talked around him, unaware of who he was. Then someone recognized him. You're the one who restored that Corvette. A man said loudly. Heads turned. The mechanic felt uncomfortable. But he didn't step back. Yes, he said simply. Questions followed. About his work. His garage. His methods. He answered plainly, without selling himself. Later, the man stood beside him and spoke to the group. That car wasn't restored by money, he said. It was restored by someone who refused to treat it like an object. He looked at the mechanic. That matters. Applause followed, polite but real. A few people approached afterward, not with offers to buy him, but with respect. One mentioned a partnership. Another asked for advice. Nothing forced. Nothing rushed. The mechanic left early. Back at the garage, he sat alone and thought about everything. He realized something important. He didn't need to escape his life to improve it. A month later, the man returned again. This time, he brought papers. Not contracts, deeds. I bought the land next to your garage, he said. It's yours if you want it. No conditions. The mechanic looked at the papers, then pushed them back. I'll buy it, he said. The man smiled. You can't afford it. Not yet, the mechanic replied. But I will. The man laughed quietly. I had a feeling you'd say that. They agree on a fair price. Spread over time. No pressure. The garage expanded slowly. A second bay. Better tools. A small office. Nothing flashy. The Corvette returned once more, months later, just for a checkup. The mechanic smiled when he saw it. "She still runs like a promise," he said. The man nodded. "So do you." They stood together, not as a poor mechanic and a billionaire, but as two people who had crossed paths at the right moment. The Corvette drove away again, not as a symbol of wealth, but as a reminder that real value shows up quietly, and real love for work, for people, for life, never needs to announce itself.